So welcome everyone to Share Humanity USA's event, The Road to Rebuild, Empowering Refugees to Restore Their Lives. My name is Michelle Carney, and I'm the fundraising consultant for Shared Humanity USA. So I know we have a lot of familiar names on the call, but also some newcomers from the different organizations that we have on the call today. So I'll just start off by sharing a little bit about Shared Humanity and who we are. So Shared Humanity USA is a nonprofit that provides urgent and sustained humanitarian relief to refugees who are seeking safe haven from war and violence. And we do this through vocational training at the Center for Shared Humanity and also through emergency relief efforts. You'll get to hear a lot more about that and about our work from our founders who are on the call. But we decided to host this panel discussion today to bring together three incredible organizations who are aiding refugees and to bring them together to share strategies and best practices for helping refugees in Greece gain access to education and employment so that they can rebuild their lives and reintegrate into their communities. So just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the event, please put them in the chat box, and during our Q&A session, we'll pass those on to our panelists so they can answer them for you. Also, you can see all of our panelists, but we cannot see you, and the other attendees on the call cannot see you as well, so you don't have to worry about that. And just a note that we will be recording the event just for Shared Humanities purposes. And again, none of you will be on that recording. It'll just be the panelists in our discussion. So now I'm excited to introduce Barry Noble, who is the Secretary of Shared Humanity USA and an executive board member. He will be the moderator for our panel discussion this evening. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Barry, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panelists. Oh, and go ahead and unmute yourself, Barry, so we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. Tonight we have Latifa Woodhouse. Say hello, Latifa. Latifa is founder and president of Shared Humanity USA and the author of the autobiographical Latifa Unveiled. And she is the daughter of refugees over from Afghanistan several years ago. And then we have Colin Woodhouse. Say hello, Colin. Colin is co-founder and president of Shared Humanity. We have Melonee Douglas. Melonee, say hello. Melonee is the Assistant Vice President of Humanitarian Partnership Policy and Practice at HIAS, that organization formerly the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Melonee has been with HIAS for 6 years. Prior to her current role, most recently served as National Director for Africa and Eurasia, the Greece portfolio for HIAS from 2017 and just this past month. Then Cassandra Ryan. Cassandra, say hello. Hello. Cassandra is Vice President and Chief Development Officer at the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, UUSC, and she oversees that organization's fundraising and outreach with UU congregations and with individual members numbering approximately 40,000. And we have Arman Mosavi. Arman, wave to the crowd. Say hello. Can you hear me? Good. Arman is a former English teacher and a student of music at the Center for Shared Humanity. To start Arman is going to perform a song in Persian. If you'd like to view the lyrics in English, they will be posted in the chat box. Go ahead, Arman.
You'll have to go ahead and unmute yourself, Arman, so that we can hear you perform.
Now do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I want to introduce me again for some people they came new. And okay, my name is Arman Mosavi. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm 22.5 years old. I have been living in Greece since 2018. And now, first, I think I should play and singing. Second, if you have question, I will answer. Okay. از خواب برگشتم به تنهایی، گل میزنم از تو به زیبایی، چشمامو میبندم و میبینم دنیا رو با چشم تو میبینم. دنیای من با عشق درگیره، عشقه که تو نباشی میمیره، عشقه که تو دست تو گل داده، عشقه که به دست من افتاده. تو مثل من رویاتو میبافی، با دست من موهاتو میبافی، خورشید و با چشمات روشن کن، یک بار ما قسمت من کن. من پشت این پنجره میشینم، بارون و تو چشم تو میبینم، عیبی نداره چشم تو پاکن، عیبی نداره باز غمگینم، بازی نکن با قلب داغونم. من آخر بازی رو میدونم، حیفه بخوایم از هم جدا باشیم، من تو همیشه همونم. That's it.
Arman, thank you very much. That was lovely.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay,
I hope
now I'm going
that
to ask you. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What led you to the Center for Shared Humanity, and what impact did that experience of teaching have?
Okay, that's a good question. I was a refugee for a year and a half, and my English was good. I went to the Afghan Community Center, and the manager of Afghan Community, Muhammad Mirzai, was a board member of the Afghan Community. He introduced me to Mrs. Latifa Woodhouse, and also he spoke about the Shared Humanity USA. And Mrs. Latifa Woodhouse invited me to teach English at the Shared Humanity USA Center. So my English was good and we spoke together, but I had never taught before.
Arman, could you share a story of a refugee that was supported by the center?
Can you repeat your question?
Can you share a story of a refugee who was supported by the Center for Shared Humanity?
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can. And okay, when I teach in this center, we had classes, English classes, computer classes, and knitting classes. There were some people, so they did not have any place to sleep and they did not have anywhere to go for teaching. So Mrs. Latifa Woodhouse found a woman who was Afghan, and she did not have anything to eat and anywhere to sleep. And her name was Shima. So we brought her inside the center, and we make for him a bed, and for her to a bed, everything. So he was living there, and she was living there, and she also learned English, computer, also music class, and also she was teaching knitting class. And almost for a year she was living there, and she was the manager inside the center to so when the student came inside, she made tea. Also, sometimes she made dinner, lunch for everyone. So she was very good. Sometimes she called to students if they did not come to center, and she asked, "Where are you? Why you did not come? What happened to you? Everything is okay like this." And there was also another woman that she did not have any place to sleep. Uh, Miss Shema invited her to the center and spoke with Miss Latifa Woodhouse that this girl doesn't have anywhere to sleep. Can I bring it here because of helping? Miss Latifa Woodhouse said, yes, we are helping you. We come or we want to help everyone that needs. So she also was here for some times. When her passport became ready, she left to Germany. After a year also, when everything was good with Miss Shema, she also went to Germany to join her children. After her, also two women came inside the center. They did not have a place to sleep, and they did not know anything about language like English, computer. So they were here, they were there, and they studied, and they were living in this center. So first, they learned English. Second, they lived in the center. They had a place to sleep. They had classes, everything. So it means uh, a lot of refugees learned English, and some of them that they did not have any place to sleep, they had this place, and they were safe.
Arman, could you tell us a little more about what it was like teaching English?
Teaching English. A lot of I had students that all of them were women. They were from Afghanistan and they were from Iran. That they they never have gone to school before in Afghanistan, so they did not know anything from English. So I started beginner English with them from ABC, and I teach them beginner level because they were very basic and they did not know anything. So because for those people who did not go to school, who did not go to school, they did not know how to write, how to read. It is very difficult to make them understand. So they were very, they loved me a lot because they said you try a lot to teach us and to translate word by word or sentence by sentence for me or for us. So they were very happy, and they invited their friends to come to this class because they said you teach good. And in Greece, yes, a lot of organization works, but a lot of them don't translate because um, there is less people to translate the language to another language. So it's a little bit difficult.
Thank you very much for this.
No.
And thank you for coming and sharing. That was, we appreciate that. And now, let Arman has shared his experience at the Center for Humanity as a student and as a teacher. Can you speak more broadly about how Shared Humanity USA helps refugees reintegrate into the community?
Is it for me, Barry? You said Latifa. I didn't hear that part, right?
I can repeat it.
No, I know the
Oh,
question. Okay.
okay.
Well, thank you, Arman, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction of yourself in the center. I really am proud of you and appreciate how far you have come. So this is like, I feel like I'm your own mother, and what we invested in is the results is very fruitful, and thank you. Our work with Share Humanity started in 2015 when, as you all know and you all saw, Alan Kurdi was washed to the shore at the Aegean Sea. And that's when me, as a daughter of refugee, and Colin, who has always supported, and we work with the UUSC, with our own congregation, social justice people, we said, this is too much. We must do something. So Colin went to Syrian concerts. I went to my congregation, to the Social Justice Committee, said, we got to do something about what's happening in Greece. And that's how our work started. And thank God, and I am grateful to my children who turned around us and said, Mom and Dad, what can we do? And they were our fundraisers. They went to their friends and they raised, during the 2 months, $30,000 for us to go with. In 2015, we started the plan, but in the month of January of 2016, we were successful to make the journey. It was Colin, myself, Alexander Woodhouse, my youngest daughter, and Diane Lombardi, one of the pediatricians from our congregation, who made the journey to Lesbos, Greece. And of course, we had reserved a hotel in a resort or outside, you know, which was, we didn't need any heaters or whatever. But the first year in Lesbos, as we came out of the plane, there was snow on the ground. And Colin and I and Diane and Alexander, we would go every morning to Camp Moria. That's where we started our work, which is the largest camp, and you all know that again, in Lesbos, Greece, in the refugee, wherever they come, they bring them to Camp Moria for screening and for giving them the numbers. This was 2016, January. So at that time, the refugees were allowed in 4 to 5 days to go back to Athens, and from Athens to go to Macedonia and then to Germany. And that was a good time. And we felt really good about our work. Colin made stores for lots of clothing and shoes, and he was developing the camp. I, on the other hand, was a translator for the Health Point with doctors and nurses, and it was an incredible rewarding journey that we made in 2016. And Alexander was also our helper in learning Pashto from me, so she could talk to all the refugees and help them with clothing as they came out of the water, wet and soaking wet. So those were the good days. And then as I, our journey has been a long one. We've been to Greece 8 times, different parts of Greece, Thessaloniki, Chios, Lesbos, Athens, but always Lesbos and Athens. And we have spent at least 3 to 4 weeks every time we've been there, and worked with refugees in camps. But at the time of Camp Moria, it was good. We would give them the rescue and relief funds, which was the money that my children had risen. And they would go on their way to Germany. And that was the good time. But March 20th, 2016, EU made the decision that the doors were closed. And that's where the problems really started. And then the same year, we went in 2016 in August with my other daughter, Sarah, and my son, Evan, and Colin and I. And we partnered with Team Humanity of Denmark. Salam Al-Din is the head. And that was the time where we went to camps, and the situation was horrific for these refugees. I mean, they lived in unbelievable situations with scorpion and snakes and not clean water. And all we did was we would buy lots and lots of food and rent trucks and deliver the food to 2,000 families for a month. That's how we helped those, in August up to the. Then again, we went in 2017 and did assessment trips and found out how we, in 2017, Share Humanity became a licensed official because Colin and I both felt we need to have a hub there and to be there permanently or to some extent, whatever we can do to make a difference. So that's when we really started Share Humanity USA, and we started a very successful center with vocational training and English, computer, Greek language, plumbing, constructions, and carpentry, and that was very, very successful. Unfortunately, the budget requirements, we didn't have enough money at the time. It really didn't prosper. The center was open for a year, but the students are still calling me from Germany and Switzerland and said, what we learned in that center, we're now using it for jobs. So there is a success story to the end of that. So that center was then closed in the end of 2017. Then in 2018, we started with Afghan Community Center, Immigration Center in Athens. And we also felt because there were a lot of conflict and issues between men and women, and they were coming from different countries, Syria, Afghanistan. So we opened a center just for women, safe center for women. And we did a lot of assessment in the parks, what women were going through, how they were suffering, there were sexual trafficking, there was a lot of issues. So that is when we started the Safe Center for Women. And then of course, my other children came and other friends from Massachusetts and from other areas of the United States came to see the center. And of course, the UUSC representative, Mike, was also one of them that we took to camps, and we worked with the refugees hand in hand, face to face, and helped them. And that's where we met Arman and many other women. And the stories are heartbreaking, incredible. And we, did a lot, and we are still continuing. Unfortunately, right now, because our center was open until December of 2019, but 2020. And right now, we are 2021. We were hoping that March 1st, the Mohammed Mirzai gave us a wonderful proposal. It was passed by our board, but the UNICEF executive director that we have good relationship with said the Greek government would not allow any NGO or any educational center because of COVID. The restrictions are very difficult. So we are right now holding off for a few more months, but the plan is there. We have a great plan that Colin will talk about what we're going to do, hopefully, if it opens in April, May, or June. And Colin, now I gave it to you. Oh. And I hope this was enough. If you need any more information, I'm here for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. So okay, Colin, could you just...
how much time do I have, Barry?
You've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. It's been difficult this year because of several reasons. Not only COVID has been a major issue, but also people are wearing down with the influx of refugees, the Greek people. They are fed up. Frankly, many are fed up. They're resisting the flow. There's rumors of pushback, pushing people in boats back into Turkish waters, so the Turkish Coast Guard will pick them up. And this is all happening fully under the nose of the EU and many of the Greek authorities. So there is, I mentioned that because there is a conservative, if you will, or a preservation movement in Greece where the Greek authorities want to get control of the NGOs, and rightly so, and also perhaps in a more restrictive way, you know. So we're hearing that the requirements to operate are going to be much more severe. The financials are going to be much more reviewed, and the expectations are going to be a lot higher. And it's going to be tough to operate there if you don't have a good partner and a Greek partner, I think. And what we're considering, we're feeling it in the United States. We're seeing what's going on with education here. There's a transition going on that may, parts of it may hold, and that's online teaching, online instruction, using computers and digital access to learn. When you consider refugees, they're, if you will, piled up at the door of Europe. They don't have access to many of those tools to learn. You know, we've just gone through the 10-year anniversary, if you will, or commemoration of the Syrian civil war. And there's over 6 million refugees from Syria. It's unprecedented. The Afghans are going into over 42 years of war, and there's pressure in Afghan society to get out. The people from Africa are moving into Europe as best they can, taking excruciatingly difficult journeys and very dangerous journeys into Libya and beyond to try to get to Europe. But the short situation is, or let's say the summary is, that many of these people, many of these children will not have access to education. The governments of many of these countries don't want these kids in their schools. They don't want to open up the schools for them. They don't want to make it available for families to live in their neighborhoods. Even the United Nations is cutting on this stipend for people who live more than 2 years. It's expecting them to get a job. So it's getting kind of like systematically brutal, is the way I would say. And we've talked to some of the organizations there, the longstanding United Nations organizations and others, and they said, look, you can operate as informal educators, that's needed, but be careful about operating in an educational setting if you don't offer a graduation, some kind of access to the larger community. And we've taken this to heart. And I think going back to what America is experiencing in Europe, the educational restrictions, but the response to get kids computers, to get bandwidth, appropriate bandwidth so that people can learn. We've been told in Greece, there's a need for these kind of tools. There's a need for the infrastructure to learn online. There's a need for the computers, the phones. There's a need for a learning center. And we are in discussions, and let's say we're in the discovery phase. How can we continue to educate, whether it be vocational, whether it be children's education, whether it be for women to learn skills or to use their skills and sell those skills? How can we do that given the current COVID lockdown? So we are looking and talking with internet or the leaders of digital technology. We've gone out with a letter. We have sent a letter to Bill Gates saying that, you know, I'll read it to you. In a society where we are increasingly defined by our access to information, and what we earn is what we learn. If you do not have access to technology, you are going to be left in the digital dark ages. And I say that the refugees are on the edges, the fringes of society, and time is running out. So we're working with a Greek organization and Greek experts to try to get, if you will, a seat at the table when UNICEF is calling together a group of organizations to talk about education policy, what will be accepted by the EU, by their corporate partners, by the Greek government. And we want a seat at that table as best we can get access so that we can fill the gaps that are left behind by many of these large organizations. And Mr. Luciano, head of the UNICEF organization in Greece, said, yes, we have gaps, and we'll look for ways that you can fill, whether the informal or the formal gaps. So we are at a point. I guess the good thing about the positive of COVID is that we can reflect, we can build collaboration units, if you will. We could talk about different ideas with our partners and try to come up with an educational program that continues our commitment to vocational training, to educating children, to providing a safe center for people who are on the run. You know, the stories that people have left behind, they unburden themselves to us, and we carry those stories. And many are heart-wrenching, of loss of life, of children that can't be found. The last time one woman saw her child, they were running, trying to escape gunfire from Iranian border guards, and she had not found her autistic son. So, you know, we want to continue that educational component. We recognize the situation has changed. It's appropriate and worthy for us to be looking at different techniques to try to get corporate sponsorship with other organizations that can give us access to the technology and then access to a training. We would like to have a training center where people like Arman can train how to wire in the language, and we do a film, and and how to do a course. We do a course in the language of Persian or Pashto or Arabic. I don't see those out there. And so there's some possibility to work not only on academic training, but vocational training. So I would say, again, UNICEF said, we're in the process of evaluating. We should expect to have something together in the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin.
All right, thank you. All
Okay.
right.
Melonee, you're still here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melonee.
Legal status is critical and is typically the first step in helping refugees to retain control over their lives. How does HIAS continue to play a role in regaining this status and protecting refugee families?
Sure. Thank you, Barry. And thank you, Colin and Latifa. Thanks for having me. And I enjoyed, I feel very understanding of the challenges that your organization is facing. There are some of the same that HIAS Greece is facing. HIAS Greece was established in Lesbos in 2016. And we provide asylum seekers with direct individual legal representation, public legal education, referrals for non-legal services, and strategic litigation. We engage in strategic litigation to advance refugee protection and their rights in the country. HIAS is actually one of the only, it's one of a few organizations, I should say, that provides individual legal representation throughout the entirety of the asylum procedure. A lot of other legal aid organizations only focus on one type of representation or only focus on one part of the asylum process. So HIAS will represent a client throughout. In the event that asylum seekers receive a negative decision in that first admissibility interview, after that first admissibility interview, HIAS will draft an appeal for their client in order to advocate that the decision is reversed. And at this point, those decisions are all taking place in Athens. So in 2019, HIAS had to open up an office in Athens so that it could represent its clients through the appeals process. And through that process, HIAS now is really happy to say that we have a 70% success rate. And without that legal representation, clients typically and sadly have about a 1% success rate. So it's really important for clients to have legal representation, or for asylum seekers to have legal representation going into their first instance interviews and the appeals process. Just to build on something that Colin and Latifa were describing there is that it's an increasingly hostile environment for agencies to work in. And for the legal representation, legal aid side, what that means is that the new asylum law that went into effect in January 2020 actually expands the grounds on which protection can be denied. And it normalizes the use of detention, which is really concerning for legal aid agencies. It also put in place this fast track system, procedures that accelerate the application process. Now, if we look at that and we think, okay, it's great to have a faster process, but in reality, because the process is so fast, it's very difficult for them to secure legal representation prior to them going into their interview, which then puts them at a disadvantage, and it increases, the denial rates. In 2020 alone, HIAS reached over 2,000 direct beneficiaries through these legal aid services. Over to you, Barry.
Okay. Now that we understand the critical need of refugee status for families, can you share how this work correlates? Could you please mute if you're not muted? Melonee, could you please share how this work correlates with access to education, employment, and support services for refugee families in Greece?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So once an asylum seeker, I'm going to talk about theoretically what it's supposed to look like, and then sort of what it actually looks like, because it's different. So once an asylum seeker has their asylum seeker card, their children can actually technically go to school. But most children that are on Lesbos have no access to formal education. That's just the reality. In theory, children, so they do have this access, but unless there's some sort of an emergency, basically what happens is that they have to have a permanent address to attach their home of residence to. And the reception center where they're forced to live is not considered a permanent address. And so even though they have the right, technically they really can't enroll in school. And so because of that, you look at what's on paper, sort of the policy that's on paper and the practice, and those two things don't necessarily match. They also gain the right to work once they have this asylum seeker status, but there are little to no employment opportunities on Lesbos for them. And right now they do have curfews in place such that they're supposed to actually be in the camp from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. There are all these restrictions in place, which make it nearly impossible for them to really access work. They also, once they gain refugee status, and this is something that I think is really important to understand, their right to sort of education in the camp, their right to services in the camp, it's revoked very, very quickly once they receive basically like this residence permit. They're supposed to have full access to work and education and social welfare, just as Greek citizens do. But there's this limbo period of when they gain that status and they lose their sort of refugee status. And in that period, the challenge is that the assistance stops, cash assistance, shelter assistance, that all stops very abruptly. And they're just sort of turned out on their own with very little assistance in that limbo period. So there are critical gaps, but HIAS does have a social worker on staff. We help clients to enroll their children in school where we can get them into schools, where a school will take them. We try to help them identify housing and basically continue with their legal case if they need assistance still.
That's great. Thank you. How has COVID-19 impacted your work now? And what's the strategy for continued work?
I could go on forever about that, like Colin, but I won't.
You only have about a minute or two.
Okay, I'll make it quick. So I would look at the impact of COVID in terms of there being sort of a trifecta of crises. We had the ongoing crises prior to the pandemic, we had the COVID pandemic, and then we had the fires in Moria, which had reverberating effects, right? So basically what our office did was we could not continue to operate in the office that we had in Melonee. It was too small, and with the COVID restrictions, we couldn't even fit our staff in that place and respect social distancing guidelines. So we were very fortunate and were able to move to a much larger space where our staff could socially distance. And once the lockdown lifted, we could start to see clients in that space. And Latifa and Colin, I should tell you, we have enough space for refugees and asylum seekers to gather for classes. If you ever want to approach HIAS Greece about possibly looking for some opportunity, a partnership there. And so in addition to that, we expanded our programming to include MHPSS programming, so mental health and psychosocial assistance, because we were finding that many of our clients, the distress of the fires, the distress of their continued situation on Lesbos, we couldn't just offer them legal aid services. They needed so much more assistance in terms of having to stay in that situation for as long as they've been in it. So we expanded our staff. We now have a team of MHPSS professionals on hand. And that's how we've adapted. And that's our strategy for continued work in Greece.
Thank you, Melonee. Thank you very much for all that detail. Cassandra, how does UUSC respond and address human rights violations against asylum seekers in Greece?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Barry. And thank you to Shared Humanity, Colin, Latifa, for having me here, your partnership with UUSC. I just feel really fortunate to be learning so much from everyone here and just really grateful for that opportunity. So much terrific work being done. So with all of UUSC's programs, and since our founding at the dawn of World War II, we primarily have worked with displaced people. And we do this by working with locally led grassroots organizations, often those that are run by people who are most affected and by women or serving women. We're not a direct services organization, so a little different, but we work hands in hand, what we call hands in hand, eye to eye, and heart to heart in partnership, always trying to challenge these systems of oppression that people are running up against. And so we follow the lead of the local groups that are developing their own solutions. Again, the model is always to work with those who are most affected, the groups that are serving people who, as Colin touched on, those that are being overlooked by the larger aid agencies. Not anything nefarious, but just it happens that a lot of these issues and people are falling through the cracks. So rather than our entering a community as like a Western-based organization, coming in and naming the problem and the solution, we work to recognize that the expertise and the leadership exists already, and that those that we're partnering with work to bolster, we're working to bolster their work already, what they're doing. And sometimes they're really small groups that are doing important work, but they need help scaling up. They need board training, they need staff hired. So we'll partner with them to sort of get them going. So we'll also, besides making grants, we provide trainings for staff and help the groups provide trainings for the refugees. We do research projects so that we can report back to the United Nations or to the government, federal levels of our own governments or the foreign governments where people are. We help with networking with the groups, legal advocacy, and even that, again, at the global level as well through the United Nations work. And we engage in activism with our membership. One of the important things we do too is fund convenings, and we did a lot of these in Greece and throughout the Balkans, is to bring these small groups together so that they can share techniques, join forces, if you will, for longer term connections. And many of them don't even know each other, don't know that they're working in similar areas. So by their bringing together their efforts, they're able to have much greater impact than they would alone, or than we could if we were alone. So in 2015, UUSC launched our Syrian emergency relief program. And as you all know, this was not just including Syrian refugees, but folks from all over the world were kind of impacted here. We partnered with 16 organizations in Greece and the Balkans, specifically Northern Macedonia, Serbia, Croatia, and Hungary. The immediate need, though, was in Greece, and that was for direct services, with thousands of people coming to the islands, and winter. It was winter time, and there just was such a lack of supplies and materials for people, especially for infants and children. So one of our approaches is that when we work with a partner, we just sort of make the grant. What do they need? You know, we do our research, we assess them, how they're working. But then the grant comes to them with no strings. And that's so important in letting them sort of run with it and allowing them to take that immediate action. Seeing more and more of that in development work, which is terrific, of kind of the cash gifts to let them, you know, deploy their plans. Also in Greece and throughout the Balkans, we were working to challenge laws that criminalize refugees. So we would help them secure legal support and access basic needs. And again, with the local groups really leading the charge there. We also work with groups that have local media connections to sort of change the narrative, help create change on a bigger scale level. In North Macedonia, we partnered with a group that was advocating for change in laws, and they had great contacts within their government, you know, smaller country, but they were able to successfully have some laws changed and remove policies that were rejecting the arrival of refugees and allowing more people to go in and seek safety. And the partner they specifically shared with us, touching back on that same point about working with larger groups, is that in his experience and her experience, they were seeing that many of the larger aid agencies were coming into the emergency situation with the ability to sort of hire away the best staff in the country, attract international funding, but would miss some of the basic needs that the folks who were working on the ground really knew more of. And they felt that that was a little harmful, not the most ideal way to do, and that UUSC kind of helped them grow through that. So that's the most important thing I think that we do at UUSC, and I know it's how shared humanity works as well. It's providing this long-term, consistent, stable support with a clear understanding of how we're going to work together. And that's just the most important piece in building these powerful change agents, so that those with whom we're all partnering are stronger for our relationship and having worked together.
Cassandra, thank you so much. And now we can turn to our questions. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Right now we have one question in the chat, and I will read it. This one I believe is for Latifa or Colin. At this time, who are your partners besides Team Humanity? And were you saying that you hope to team up with UNICEF?
I could answer that question. Yes, we are right now partnered with Team Humanity of Denmark, which they have a camp very close to Camp Moria, and they're still giving clothes and food out to those people who were pushed out of Camp Moria because of fires. And we are trying to, partner with UNICEF in Athens, in Greece. And I want to say one thing. I would be remiss if I don't mention that we are a baby of UUSC. I have had such incredible experience working with USC for 14 years as their regional coordinator. And also, we have met their partners. The Praxis was one of them in Athens, which have taken us everywhere. And that was a human rights organization in Greece, Greek. And many other partners of them. The UUSC is my heart and my soul, of course. And now we are their born baby. So we do need to collaborate and work together and continue our good work for human rights and for refugee rights.
I want to just elaborate a little bit on that question, Barry. We hope UNICEF will partner with us, and that we can fill a gap that they feel is important. And we really hope to be at the table when there's planning being done with Greek organizations, organizations like Melonee, and as you said, Cassandra, finding out who's doing what so that we don't duplicate other groups' efforts, we augment and support them. So yeah, we're hoping to be invited. We'll see what happens. We're making proposals.
Thank you, Colin. Are there any other questions? If you have a question, please type it into the chat so I can see it. Okay, I have a question here, Cassandra.
Yes, hi.
Oh, let's see. Okay. How does UUSC work with the coalition of partners to enable refugees to continue their education and gain employment? I thought that you had already answered that, but you can elaborate now, please.
Sure, great, thank you for that. So right, of course, there's a lot of different facets to how we work in partnership with these groups. It's always about meeting them where they're at, what they need, matching those desires and abilities with the local needs. And in this case, in Greece and the Balkans. But we do this all over the world. But none of it, of course, happens without the local organizations, their support. And that's so critical to how we work in our success. In Greece and in the region, we supported mobile clinics that were offering legal and psychological support to help people access basic needs, which was the first step, so that they were in a place that they could go for language skills training and job training and just to rebuild their lives. We do fund job training and language trainings. We work in placement of jobs. Sometimes folks even then work with the partner group, which is just terrific. And most importantly, I think we work to help people integrate into society. This was touched on a bit as well. They're making new lives in these new countries, and not always the country where folks are looking to land. And they need that, especially when they arrive somewhere where they may not be as welcomed, where they're facing these stricter, harsher laws and regulations. So one of our partners, the Greek Forum for Refugees, helped us to organize small local community groups in littler communities, and then trained them in these groups so that they could get access to what they needed. And really important here again, which was touched on earlier, was to stick with them and to see it through until they're able to be self-sufficient. That's a critical part of the process. It's something that where international aid often fails the most, is sort of leaving before things are done, and it causes so much harm and mistrust among agencies that are trying to do the right thing. But we funded refugee-run bakeries, a bagel shop run by victims of human trafficking, a restaurant owned by refugees. I've had the pleasure of visiting some of these places a few times, and the stories of the refugees, they're heartbreaking and very difficult, but it's incredible to see the smiles and the pride that people have in their work. We want to see them succeed, helping them navigate the legal systems, and getting all these trainings, deploying the training and the skills that they already have as well, and building those new communities. So again, our guiding star is always to just trust those who are most directly affected by injustice, knowing that they're the ones who are going to have to overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question for each of our guests. What gives you hope as you continue your efforts helping refugees in Greece? Cassandra, would you go first?
Sure. Thank you for that. It's a hard question because sometimes it's hard to maintain hope. Change takes a lot of work and it takes a long time. It can be really disheartening, and sometimes we don't see it. And then all of a sudden it's sort of there. So I think just it's the small things that we have to get joy from and to keep pushing. And look, all of us are here together working towards that same thing. That gives me joy too, in that camaraderie and partnership with everybody here.
Great, thank you. Melonee?
Sure, I would say on my visits, just, returning repeatedly and listening to the stories and talking with the asylum seekers and our staff, it's just the resilience and the perseverance of those on the ground. I mean, I will talk to the same people. I'll come back 6 months later, they're still there. They don't give up, and they're in it for the long haul, and the people are not going back, right? They're staying there. So we have to provide durable solutions. We have to figure out a way forward. And so policymakers, government officials, they can continue to try to stick their heads in the sand about this, but we're not going anywhere. And neither are the people that are there. And so I feel very strongly that resilience and perseverance are going to bring us through, and we'll find durable solutions for those that are there.
Thank you. Thank you, Melonee. Latifa and Colin, you have the last word on this. What gives you hope?
Well, I would go with Melonee, because the resilience of these people, and also the determination in the smile on their face, they are not going to go anywhere, but they've been through a lot and they still are laughing and smiling and hugging you. And I think, wow, if they keep their hope alive, hey, I have the hope alive. In Arman gives me hope. You saw him today. I met him 2 years ago in 2018. And today, with his music that he learned in our music class, the guitar, that is the determination and the hope that they are going for. And today he has a job with the Dr. Dumont, which tripled or quadrupled his salary in. He did it on his own and on his determination in the hope that he is going to be fine, you know. But the condition that you first see them when they arrive from the GNC and the Camp Moria, and then when you see them 2 years later, that gives me hope. And I'm happy for them. And I'll continue my good work.
What gives me hope are the people sitting here today, the people visiting, that there's such goodness in the world and so much respect for other people of different cultures and different journeys. And certainly, of course, the refugees, because, you know, we have met people who've lost children, husbands, and then we find out they're surviving again and they're rebuilding their lives in Europe. And it was just a smile or a few dollars or something that we could have done or that we did do to move them on. And they found they're finding their new home. And that gives me a lot of hope.
Great, thank you. We have another question. This is for anyone who wants to jump in. How do you address or balance supplying emergency relief with more long-term programs like education? And what takes priority?
That's a great question. And that's really been one of the defining questions of our organization. We began fully committed to rescue and recovery. And that's, Latifa mentioned, Alan Kurdi's drove us there. And we wanted to stop people coming out of the water and freezing to death and not having food and no way to go on. And so that was where our focus was in the early years, because at that time, the High Commission for Refugees had only 10 people in Greece. The Coast Guard wasn't ready. Nobody was ready for 1 million plus people coming through an island of 80,000 people. They needed people to come and pull them out of the water. So that situation demanded rescue and recovery. But we have talked, since then, we've talked to other organizations and they have advised us, start working on sustainability. These people aren't going on. They need to find jobs. They need to get educated. Life is moving very quickly, and they're at the bywaters of the flow of humanity. So we're committed now to building a sustainable response. However, we'll never turn anybody down who's desperate. As best we can, we'll find those resources and certainly keep always part of our resources for recovery and rescue.
That's a great answer, Colin. Would anyone else like it? 7 o'clock, but I think we can go for a few more minutes if Cassandra or Melonee has any additional thoughts on this.
I would just add, trying to keep, there's quite a bit of donor fatigue on the one end when it comes to Greece. And I think just trying to keep a focus on this in your own personal networks. I would also, add that the continued restrictive environment for civil society organizations is a real concern. And so advocacy on that end is really critical at this moment for organizations like ours to continue to operate there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on all of that, often the way that we'll operate is, food, clothing, shelter is the primary need first as soon as something happens. And then it's thinking about what are the longer term needs, which is where education, training, vocational skills all kind of follows in there. So sometimes it's a two-pronged process. This is actually with the emergency supplies is where some of the larger aid agencies are really good, not always, but often can be. And then this more longer term planning, they don't not always stick around with. And I think this is where our organizations really succeed.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of our panelists. This has been a wonderful discussion. If you would like to contribute to Shared Humanity, there is a link which is posted in the chat right now, and I'm going to pass it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Barry, for moderating our event tonight, and thank you to all of our panelists for being here and for sharing our insights, and to everyone who has joined to listen to this conversation. It's such amazing work from each organization, really making a huge impact on the refugee crisis. So I hope that everyone feels informed and inspired by our panel tonight. If so, as Barry said, we ask you to support Shared Humanity USA and help us restart our classes at the Center for Shared Humanity after closing due to COVID by texting through the code that was posted in the chat, or by donating through the link in either form, or visit us at sharedhumanityyusa.org to donate and to learn more about our work. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight, and we hope you feel inspired to join our efforts and help us fight this crisis.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you, guys.